First time in 8 years we don't have tax increases. We actually have tax decreases, which is what the voters elected me to do.
That is Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland after the General Assembly wrapped up business at midnight, declaring victory, saying we don't have any tax increases. This is what voters wanted from me. We actually have some tax decreases, no increases, decreases only. And he's declaring victory, but there is still a budget battle being waged between the governor and the state legislature. Joining us now, Christopher Summers, president of the Maryland Public Policy Institute. This is one of the leading public policy think tanks in the state of Maryland. Good morning to you, Christopher.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right, so a standoff remains. Sure. Can you sort of explain it for us?
Well, I think in some ways this is very, very healthy that this is taking place. Sure, they waited sort of to the last minute of the last hour to get this budget agreement through for Governor Hogan's first budget, but all in all, I think it's a win for Maryland taxpayers. Because what you have is, with his first budget, you really have for the first time, I think, a budget that really comes close to a freeze on spending, and also really limiting spending growth to 1%, to which, we haven't seen in the past 8 years. So, obviously there's, I think, a little shock to the system and leadership down there in Annapolis because of, again, this is, a new governor and plus a completely different governing style than what they're accustomed to.
As I understand it, the legislators have allocated certain funds to be spent in certain ways, but the governor actually controls how the money is released. And he has said to the state legislature, we're not going to release that money for those things.
Well,
what is correct, but he wanted something in return for that, right?
Correct. Well, and you have to realize when Governor Hogan was sworn in, if you remember, they did another fiscal write-down, and with revenues expected to fall nearly $1.2 billion short of what Maryland takes in, and so above Maryland's expenses. So he immediately came in first day in office, and here he's faced with this large structural budget deficit that he has to clean up, and this is what he's doing, and this is because of again, Governor Hogan's a businessman, not a politician. And Maryland cannot continue on the path that it has. Now, because of what you have is in the past, from between 2006 and 2014, state spending grew by 41%, while personal income in Maryland only grew by 26%.
Yeah, so you have a problem there. I see that, right?
So
you have a major problem.
Yeah, well, clearly, and that's why the voters did what they did in 2014 and said enough of this Hogan. Enough of this O'Malley sort of way of doing things, and brought in Larry Hogan. But here's my question for you, Christopher Summers. Today, when Larry Hogan speaks to the people of Maryland, will he be able to say, listen, your desire in November to change the way we do business in Annapolis was heard, and I've got cooperation, and the House of Delegates and the State Senate understand, and we're all working together? Or can he say, no, these guys don't get it. They gave me a little bit, but still not nearly enough, and you need to do some more?
Well, surely, and again, this is I'm sure this is his governing style is a little shock to the system, and I would probably forecast that this is going to continue. But again, I think this is a very healthy exercise governing style that Maryland has needed, and it is a win for the taxpayers because again, his budget pretty much froze spending, something that we haven't seen. And, that's why we're in the situation that we're in.
But shouldn't this have been sort of the honeymoon period? Isn't this sort of the best chance Larry Hogan has to make a major impact? Because starting next year, we're going to get back into an election cycle again.
Yep.
Well, correct. And this is, his first, sort of honeymoon, but also you have a different party that is now the chief executive of the state. So, the honeymoon period for Governor Hogan probably lasted all of about 5 minutes.
A couple other things, so the legislature passed a bunch of bills, and one of them is a fracking moratorium. Now, some people out in Western Maryland, they really wanted the fracking because they see it as an economic engine. It has been everywhere else where fracking has been allowed, but the state legislature, in its infinite wisdom, has passed a bill that says there should be a 2-year moratorium, and by the way, it passed both houses with veto-proof margin. So what's going to happen there?
Well, there again, it's and it's funny. I think the original push to stop fracking came out of Montgomery County. So you have the Montgomery County delegation controlling the economic prosperity and future of economic development in a completely different area of the state, and which there again I think the sense is the western part of Maryland where this is going to take place. Fracking is not going to be taking place in downtown Chevy Chase or Bethesda.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And it's going to be taking place. Obviously, it's a very heavy regulated industry, and it's proven to be done in a safe manner. But those jobs are needed out in Western Maryland, good paying jobs. And
the people of Western Maryland want this, by the way. I mean, if there is an environmental impact, they're the ones who would have to deal with it. Of course, there's not been any proven environmental impact in any major way in the states that have approved fracking, like North Dakota, Ohio,
Sure.
New York, and Pennsylvania. Oh, excuse me, not New York. New York is
absolutely, and it's not going to be at the large scale of where you see fracking taking in other places. I think Maryland only has a very small percentage, but still, it would create a great boon to the economy in that area that is sorely needed.
Our guest is Christopher Summers, president of the Maryland Public Policy Institute. Can you walk us through this one more time in terms of what the governor can do now? I mean, the budgets are there. They sent it to the governor. Even if he signs on to the budgets that got passed out of Annapolis, he doesn't have to spend everything that's been put in there. He can basically say, fine, I'll sign your budget, but now that it's time to actually spend money, here's what I'm deciding to spend money on.
Sure, absolutely. He has, and most people, if you're not familiar with, the constitutional powers of the Maryland governor, I mean, outside of the President of the United States, Governor Larry Hogan is the most powerful executive in the country, and that is still solely because of his budgeting powers. He submits a budget, and 188 lawmakers can only cut from his budget. They cannot add to that budget.
Right.
And plus, he can submit a supplemental budget of things that he wants to spend money on, or as you said, withhold funds. And I think really the big thing that has really upset people, obviously, he did not, and this was not a mandatory spending requirement in the area of education, which is the Geographic Cost of Education Index, which that allows to subsidize much more wealthier counties because they're richer to get more money for their education because they say, hey, it costs more. And that's Governor Ehrlich did not do that, but in Governor Hogan's first budget, he decreased that by 50%. And of course, everyone's saying,
right.
Well, look, he's cutting education. No, he's not cutting education.
Right. Yeah.
And this is what was the sticking point. And Governor Hogan held firm there again because he submitted a very responsible budget, the first one in 8 years.
All right, Christopher, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks. Have a great day.